Mhm. Okay, I have chosen this. I see it now. There we go.
Great. Yep.
Okay. I've lost everybody here, but there we are. Okay. So thank you for joining this talk. Thank you, Nella, for the invitation to speak to a wonderful crowd. So my topic is the amplification of a voice of dissent, HoCC in 2019 Hong Kong. Okay. So I'll tell you a little bit about myself. My roots are in Hong Kong. I was born there, and I immigrated to the US when I was 12, just about a year after the 1989 democracy movement, the biggest democracy movement China's ever seen. And I'm concerned for Hong Kong's future, especially when the protest broke out in 2019. And it was over a proposed bill, which was another one of Beijing's attempt to insert greater control of the semi-autonomous region. And it should remain a semi-autonomous region until 2047. So I was watching the events unfold online from afar while in Innsbruck, actually, where I currently am. So you might have seen images from the movements where about 1 million people took to the street. That's about 1 in 8 people in Hong Kong. So it was rather significant. And during this time, I was doing my PhD. And then my research slowly shifted to this context. And I looked at the role of digital platforms in the movement. So I looked at how Twitter was a leadership actor. And turning to another platform, a chat app, Telegram, I looked at how authorship affordances allowed for authoritative practices. And yeah, another work that I did, which is slightly related to the talk today, is the disorganizationality of protest art. So the backdrop to this talk is how pop culture has the ability to subvert the system. And the fabric of democracy is woven in culture. So this also involves different kinds of fandom, including music, including sports. But we're just looking at music today, or pop culture. So some songs of resistance that I will make a note of now is Stephen Foster's My Old Kentucky Home, inspired by Harriet Beecher Stowe's abolition novel, Uncle Tom's Cabin. And this one we all know, Aretha Franklin's RESPECT, so which anchored the civil rights movement and the feminist movement. Bob Marley and the Wailers, Get Up, Stand Up. Green Day's American Idiot, very recent, or for me, very recent. And now from the Black Lives Matters movement, Kendrick Lamar's All Right is probably still on the minds of a lot of our students. So this is not a list that does any justice to protest songs. But what about Chinese ones? There really are not that many. So I remember one from the biggest democracy movement I mentioned in 1989 is Thieu Xian's Nothing to My Name. And he performed this on Tiananmen Square before the incident/massacre happened. And related to the talk today and 2019, the Hong Kong protest, is a pseudonymously released song called Glory to Hong Kong. And the subject of my talk, a pop artist, Denise Ho, also known as HoCC, She actually doesn't have a protest song, but she has been known to repeatedly produce songs with queer overtones. So who is she? Denise Ho, Ho Wen-si, is a singer-songwriter, a democracy activist. So she's just one voice. She's a mainstream Cantonese pop artist, and she came out as a lesbian in 2012, and she came out as a democracy activist in 2014. So I'll talk a little bit about this and then focus on her digital activities before I turn to a theory which can be applied as a frame to analyzing such a space, or the digital space, which can potentially be activated as a third space. So, and that's how dialectic isn't a pairing, but how it can make space. So, okay, let's turn back to HoCC's identity. When she came out as an activist, she was committing career suicide. Her friends told her that, and she knew that. But she did it anyway. And this is not from coming out as a lesbian, and this is already quite a thing in Hong Kong. But she was born in Hong Kong, and she moved to Canada at a young age. So in that way, we have a lot in common. Yeah, so it was during the umbrella movement of 2014 that she stood up. She stood with Hong Kong. And so she immediately became banned from China and this mega market. I mean, not just you cannot come in, but you cannot sell your music here. You cannot, no fans will access your music because they anyway have a very strict control of the digital realm. So yeah, some other countries in Asia also refused visa for her entry to do shows. And she also lost corporate sponsorship. And one of her first activity that she did after this career suicide is chopping up the sponsorship that's needed to do her show. So to examine these activities is important because we can now better understand the crucial role of digital materialities, what they have for women and those othered in claiming their voices in protest. So when she lost this corporate sponsorship, Lancome, the beauty brand, she managed to get 100 sponsorships at about 15,000 Hong Kong dollar each. So they're about 2,000 pounds, 2,000 euros. And all just within one day, she was able to get the sponsorship money that she wanted because she posted something on Facebook. And they came from individuals, about half came from individuals due to the fact that it's a smaller amount, and from restaurants, a clinic, or engineering firms also. And more money actually flowed in, but which enabled her to continue to do her concerts. And another set of activities that she engaged in is talking. So for that, we also have something in common. So she was in a TEDx Youth talk in 2016 during the Umbrella movement. So this is kind of a local version, not the high production TED talk, but then in 2019, she was doing a TED talk and both of these are still accessible online today. And in the 2019 talk, she referred to art and protest, and she sang at the end of this talk. But how she started this talk was she referred to a song, the song that was pseudonymously released on the LIHKG, which is like a Chinese or Hong Kong Chinese Reddit-like forum. So it was released there, and she was using her voice to amplify this song and claim that it's an anthem. And of course, activists were already singing that, but it definitely gave this song a lot more power. And she called this a form of soft power. And she also spoke briefly at the Oslo Freedom Forum. So really being an ambassador for democracy in the movement. So soon after that came COVID. Also, a national security law came into effect in June of 2020. So when that happened, it changed the face of protests in Hong Kong. People really were no longer able to do much of it. And people also scrubbed the digital traces because the nature of this law is it is very vaguely written. It can be interpreted by the lawmakers, or the police can basically arrest you for, they say you're committing sedition or you're colluding with foreign forces because you have something on a piece of paper, let's say, that they don't agree with. So this is a terrible law. I don't like it. So she was arrested and jailed briefly, and she remained resilient though. So she now still has a blog and her YouTube channel. And she also is still singing. So you would assume that she isn't political anymore because of the fact that you shouldn't be political, you sort of cannot be political, but we will still look at some of her activities. And yeah, so the materialities is important to look at, and we have to understand them not just as things, touchable and quantifiable, that we use, but that they're imbued with culture, language, imagination, and memory. So another aspect, something that we know about digital technologies, is the importance of audiencing. So beyond production and distribution, we should consider the site where people sense the works and where they make meaning of them. So in art it's a little bit different than just art. When we think of a painting that, say, from Renaissance time, that adorns the altar to get us to be more religious and control our behavior in some way, what passes through the digital is situated in terms of place and space a little bit differently. And in that way, it's ripe with potential for new modes of being. So I've looked at the platform's affordances, authorship affordances. This was related to how the activists were using Telegram, the chat app, to make collective decisions while they took over the airport, and they collectively decided to do a bunch of things. And some of them were to their detriment, but I named some authorship affordances in that case. So anonymity, which is in a way very obviously happening online, but transferred to here, we can see how that anonymity allowed the authorship of artistic material like the anthem, which was released on the platform. Like, we don't really know who the person, Thomas XYG, we don't really know his real identity. And another notion is hypertemporality. And it refers to how technology pushes the temporality of in-person interaction as a multiplying force. So we're now everywhere in the world getting together through the screen. And potentially this is also recorded, right? And somebody could watch this at a later time when they feel like it. So in that way, it's multiplied. And affectivity refers to how in authoring, people are combining discursive and affective resources to establish their authority. So another something that I'm happy to learn as I engage in this talk is, and I think some of you in the audience would understand this a little more than I do, is the spatial nature of gender performance. And these authors, of course, draw from Butler's work. So it's the spatial nature of Denise Ho's gender performances. they're conceptualized as materialities that become textualized in the technological space. And this is how the voices become amplified. Okay, so extending affordances of technologies or through the use of technologies, relating this to audiencing and how gender and apolitical performances happen through materiality. We may apply a dialectic analysis or dialectics as a useful analytical lens to expose forces of distinction and separation. So in this way, dialectic isn't male-female, heteronormative, and let's say, so we're not looking at one against another, but we're creating a space for more potentialities to happen. So, okay. Yeah. So yes, not from, the word is not heteronormative, but non-normative. Yes. And recognizing that there's space for queer or otherwise. And maybe there's even room to move away from the divisive us versus them thinking that is still rooted in how we think about identity, or how, we tend to form our identity when we construct the other. But maybe there's a way to think of this in a new way. So with a tiny bit of data, this is her latest blog. It's a new thing for her. She used to have these podcasts and she stopped doing that. So I'm relating this a little bit to the talk, the panel this morning, because I suspect, I didn't interview her. I only am suspecting, like, she just changed from doing these podcasts. So podcasts tend to be through these platforms, right? Like Apple Podcasts, and you have to have these. I think the platforms make a lot of money. Let's say and she's using a service called Substack, and you can just subscribe to it. And I think she could monetize, but she isn't doing that, or maybe she's not doing that just yet. But this would be like the 1, 2, 3, 4 pictures is kind of in left to right order. And it says, learn Hoc Yat Man, Hoc Jing Min Bao, Hoc Zhou Yan. So it says, learn Japanese, learn to make bread, learn to be human. So these are it's really like a diary sort of blog. And you see that in the beginning, she's next to a queer artist. And I remember him, and I don't keep up with Hong Kong pop culture very much, but he is famous for being very different, which is not that common in Hong Kong. And the second screenshot, you will see, it's like a game for learning Japanese. And, Chinese-Japanese relations aren't the best, huh? So this is already creating some differences in opening up to new cultures. So then there is the bread video that she came across and recommends for people to make bread. And on the third one is a promotion for an art show of Gigi Fong, and an artist with her painting. And the last is learn to be human. I don't know what that is. Maybe that is the art part. So you can see that she's just creating new spaces, and where there's not really a boundary of, okay, this is just for so-and-so. This is rather open. It's not members only. And also away from these big platforms. So in this sense, she's activating a third space. In Lefebvre's understanding, dialectic is a third force that disrupts any pairing. And this is this is Skoglund's and Holt's ideas. So relations steeped in norms and expectations can be disrupted by tensions and interplays between ideals and habits in spatial performances. So I really enjoy engaging with practice theory, because here is now some ideals that are in our minds, the cognitive, and what our habits is what I relate to practice, and that there's always room in creating new practices. So this is where here's a space where alternative modes of living can be embodied and practiced. And just as injustice are inscribed in space, so too opportunities to refuse the prescribed modes of living, and new modes of living can be created. Oh, yeah. So a little bit more theoretical. I think this might be inspired by the fact that Kay Kenny is speaking today, and she engages with Foucauldian work a lot as well. So performances not only disrupt, and they also transform. So these ongoing practices are specific techniques of the self, understood as those intentional and voluntary actions by which women not only set themselves rules of conduct, but also seek to transform themselves, to change themselves in their singular being, and to make their lives an oeuvre that carries certain aesthetic values and meets certain stylistic criteria. And in this sense, the aesthetic, the qualitative, creatively self-enjoying aspects of life, and the political, the relational, participatory aspect co-occur in every activity, and they're ripe with potentiality. And so in this sense, this is more like a question that will be asked and answered. Does HoCC embody an alternative mode of living that is still political? Obviously, from this perspective that I've proposed. And I'm interested in how she's opened up spaces for her fans, turning to the audience from a dialectic perspective. So she really embodies an alternative mode of living that is not just aesthetic, but political. And this embodiment is much more active than being just a body. And it indicates the negotiation of everyday life in relation to the material world and the creation of social life. So this was from Dale and Burrell. So now I have just this slide left, and this is maybe something we can engage with for the rest of the time, maybe some future actions in terms of what we can do with digital or art. For example, what researching art is about or can be, or art as research can be like, and what can management scholars do, and organizing in contentious context. So we tend to look within organizations, but where else can we look beyond organizations? And one thing that I enjoy doing is constructing less obvious data. So what is the data here? I actually did not have the slide from the blog until I practiced the talk, and I realized it was a little bit short. So I needed to add a little content. And I was like, okay, it needs data now. So I put the blog in, and yeah, so what can be data? Like just a slight piece of, just one blog post can be unfolded in so many ways. And while we can look at what she's doing and what is telling, here is really important of what she's not doing, that is also telling. And yeah, so art as a classroom enrichment, because I mean, students are used to very short scrolls, and clips of video is getting super short even. Yeah, so what can we do, and how do we engage them in teaching and attune them to others through our through our senses. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Marilyn, very much. So I will invite now people to pose questions. I think the easiest way would be to raise hands and pose a question yourself. But if you feel more comfortable, you can also type it in the chat and I'll read it out for you, for Marilyn. Marilyn, thank you so much for this presentation. And I see how you, because I Googled HoCC before your talk, I can see how you brought into this presentation, how you draw on that kind of visual resources that HoCC uses in her kind of engagement, digital everyday engagement. So I can see that there has been that continuity from digital space into another digital space. I can see, you know, how that multiplicity that you mentioned, or hypertemporality that you mentioned, unfolds. But I was more curious about this kind of gendered experience of protest and kind of voice that is obviously digital, as you have demonstrated. Digital space offers so much in terms of kind of amplifying space, especially in protest, especially for marginalized groups. But you said something really curious here. She said she came out, you know, she came out as lesbian, which is kind of a standard phrasing that we hear about people disclosing that kind of information to the world. But you said something else. She came out as a democratic activist, and that kind of drew my attention. And I was wondering if you could tell us a bit more about what you mean by coming out as a democratic activist, because in many, not in many ways, but it should be about a default, right? Democratic activism should be a default. It should be something that we practice daily. We do not necessarily need to come out as democratic activists. So can you just unpack that moment for us a little bit?
Yeah, so I think Hong Kong being in kind of at the friction line of the East and the Chinese East, the CCP East, and the West being the democratic, and also is very much super capitalistic too. And I don't just have in my mind that this only romanticized notion of democracy, that it does come coupled with a problematic side, but yeah, it's not so taken for granted, because actually a lot of artists, like a very popular one being Jackie Chan, he came out to support the CCP. You know, he was a voice piece for, you know, speaking, saying how the activists it shouldn't be happening. So even though it is by law as a democratic territory, is not the case in practice. So yeah.
Yeah, well, thank you. I think it was important to surface that kind of context around that democratic voice that is being exercised. And you talked about, you know, HoCC being very kind of adept in voicing democratic demands. And that she obviously used a digital space to do so. And I was just wondering, how does, I don't know if you did that kind of, maybe I'm putting too much on you, but I was just thinking how her activism compares to other kind of feminist activism, because feminists, especially around these famous digital movements such as Me Too, for instance, have been using these kind of digital resources to amplify their voice or to put forward ideas that are perhaps a bit difficult to articulate. So how does that, can you just kind of talk about a little bit about HoCC in relation to the existing kind of feminist activism?
I think she's really subtle. And I mean, this is even before the national security law. She spoke up against, she spoke up for the movement, and she often pointed to other activities. So during her TED Talk, she was really highlighting the song, and she sang in the end, and she does not have any political songs herself, political in terms of democracy or against China, because it is also a fact that Hong Kong is a part of China. This is where this one country, two system problem also lies. But as a feminist artist, I think she is just authentic about her own identity, and she doesn't hide from it. But she doesn't, let's say, she doesn't point to it too much. And especially after the national security law and after having been arrested, and we don't know what agreements there's been. She may have had to agree to certain things to say not still remain in jail, perhaps. So notably, she's active on certain platforms like Facebook and Instagram. I don't do TikTok because it's Chinese owned. So I doubt that she's on TikTok. And she is also super quiet on X and previously Twitter, because maybe it's just seen as political. Whatever you say there can be construed as, but she is just, yeah, I think really just trying to be herself. But in looking at it through this dialectic lens, you can see that, okay, someone being themselves ought to be understood as aesthetic/political. It's only in this way we can then see where there are spaces for new forms of living without, or maybe it's just a crack to sneak through without being arrested.
Yeah, I was also kind of curious about, because obviously we received snippets about this Hong Kong protest in media here, and I was thinking a lot ahead of your talk. What happens with this kind of activism through digital sphere when that becomes seized by government? Like, how do you, because that is what happened at some point with social media in Hong Kong. So how is that kind of the end of activism, or does that transforms into something else?
Good question. I think everybody is careful because, even though, say, when the national security law was happening and people were busy scrubbing their accounts, and you can see, say, a tweet had so many likes or retweets, the number changed because those accounts went away, and it actually affected what it looked like. So, and in doing the Twitter paper, it started as a seminar paper, an assignment, and I think the first research question was, who are the leaders of this leaderless movement? And we were looking at Twitter data. It's a digital methods course. But then sooner than later, rather soon, we realized we cannot pick out these leaders and call them leaders. Are we crazy? Because this has a big consequence on these people's lives. And it wasn't, we had no idea that it was still in late 2019. So we didn't know that there was going to be a national security law, but we know there is China. So there is consequences to what we do, and I think in that way people are watchful of our activities. We're controlled in that sense.
Thanks, Marilyn. I can see Lynn's hand being raised. So first her, and then Joe has a question in chat.
Hi, Lynn.
Hi, Marilyn. Thanks so much for that presentation. It really got me thinking. Much appreciated. I don't know whether this will be an irritating comment, but one of the things that it made me think about with the subtleties of the process and the appearing and disappearing and reappearing was Anna Singh's book on the mushroom at the end of the world, and how so the Matsutake mushroom transcends nation states and pops up in different places in the ruins of forests that have been commercially harvested, but also the communities that build around those mushrooms, and and how they're viewed as kind of lawless as well, and how they have to live, and how they engage with commercial concerns because these mushrooms are very precious and expensive. And so I was wondering if you could, if it's just a yes and maybe if I'm just suggesting that you might find it interesting to read that if you haven't already.
I haven't read it, but it's on my list as an audiobook. I have an app through a library, and but I hear it's a really big book. But I thought of that book because it's been mentioned when I was at the GWO workshop in Linz, and I also keep being reminded of it because her Gu blog. Gu is the word for mushroom in Chinese. So it's a nickname for people with the boyish haircut often. And the pop culture of Chinese or Hong Kong paparazzi gave this nickname to her at some point, and she just took it in, as her one of her aliases. So yeah, I think that book will be super interesting because I really like how things are interconnected, and it's just a really challenging reason why, like say, if this research, if it was to, this non-research yet, but if this idea was to become a paper, then it's always so much more than what you can focus on. So always branches out to, for example, you hear that this is a big book and it's like, oh no, and papers are really only so long.
It's not that big. It's not that big. And it repeats.
Okay.
It repeats. But it was part of our reading group in the network for a while. And I mean, I agree that you can't read anything, and I'm not censoring, but I thought that the ideas in it linked well with the subtleties of organizing and the precarities of organizing that you were describing in your text.
Yeah, I also heard about your materiality group at the workshop. So I will for sure. I would like to join that, but let's see what the future brings for the groups.
I am muted. There's a question from Joe. It says, "Hi, Marilyn. What an amazing presentation. Thank you so much. Protest songs are so interesting on so many levels. The subtle ones, to me, often echo as loudly as the more overt ones. Some of my favorite musicians are very political in their messages, overtly and more implicitly. in a UK context, the last can be drowned out by all of the other noise. Would the same be true of Hong Kong, or would it be the reverse? I think you've gestured towards this in an answer to Nella, and then she added, equally, their messaging can be badly misunderstood as excessive patriotism in the cases of the bands I'm thinking of. Yeah, that's a really good question, and especially because I also noticed that a lot of these songs, a lot of these bands were actually American rather than Chinese, and I was also, to add to what Joe was saying, I was also wondering if you could also reflect on the choice, like why those? Why do you think they chose those? Yeah.
What do you? I'm a little confused.
Joe, do you want to come in and maybe clarify your question?
Sure.
Because there are two
Sorry,
questions.
I tend to write in a language. Apparently, English is my first language, but you can't always tell. I'm just going to give you a specific example, Marilyn. So the two bands that I'm thinking of, I won't bore you with their names, but they are both passionate about climate injustice, the environmental devastation that we're witnessing, that the land is the commons, it shouldn't belong to people, to individual people, it belongs to all of us. Can we please stop polluting the seas, etc., etc. Now, they don't, you know, I like a lot of very overtly political musicians as well, and you only have to almost take one look at them and hear them to know that that's what they're doing. But these other bands I'm thinking of are more subtle, they're more nuanced. And what that sometimes means is that I will go to a gig to see one band in particular that I'm thinking of, or I'll go on their Facebook page, and I think 80% of people who are fans and go to the gigs and follow them on Facebook get what they're trying to say. But then there's another 20% that like them because they think they are saying England is for the English. And that's how they've been interpreted sometimes. And in fact, in one particular case, so much so that they had to change their name. They were compelled by themselves to change their name because they were so sick of people interpreting them as neo-fascists, effectively, which they are. I can't imagine anybody less neo-fascistic than
Was
this
it
band.
like the Dead Kennedys or a punk band was like this?
Yes, I love the Dead Kennedys. Yeah.
Yeah, I think they had to really say Nazis fuck off during made their songs. Yes,
exactly.
Yes,
exactly.
because
And actually,
there were
that's
all
very
these
interesting because the Dead
neo-Nazis showing
Kennedys
up
were
like,
very,
oh, they're
but they were very overt in their messaging. To me, how could you misinterpret that?
Yeah, but as
suppose,
a youth in the US, I mean, I thought punks, like, it took me a while before I liked punk because I did think they were Nazis. I associated that with until then I realized they're not, and I was like, oh, I'm going to these shows now.
Yeah, exactly. But it's just interesting in the sense that, to me, there's no possibility of misinterpreting what's going on here. And maybe I'm just being incredibly arrogant and thinking that I know what the band are and what they do and what they say. But I suppose it's not about my experience. It's more about what kind is, in the Hong Kong context, is more subtle messaging of that kind likely to be more or less effective.
Oh, and the Chinese songs, the songs in Chinese, I think they're more obvious. I mean, the anthem is very obvious because the wording is, the way is even being passed around. There's no artist, it's just lyrics online and pseudonymously released, but you made me think of, and the one earlier from the 89 protests from 30 odd years ago, before the Tiananmen Square crackdown massacre, there was some hope that that wasn't going to happen. People actually hoped that maybe China would open up. So that I forget Chang. He actually performed on the square, and that song is when I did this preparation, I heard the song, and I haven't heard that song in over 30 years, and I remembered it. So there's just so much power in our memories in what songs can do. And I definitely didn't understand the song then, but he is in a kind of also rock guitar sound, and this is not traditional Chinese music. It's very much co-opted from the West.
Yeah, which makes it even more interesting.
I also liked how you brought up the environmentalist songs. I don't know too many of them, but I know that the Extinction Rebellion, they make a songbook, and they make this available for, that people can then engage with or access. And that, I think this is just another powerful way that the digital is working.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much. It's fabulous work.
Thank you.
Thanks, Marilyn. Gosh, you two opened up so many interesting questions just in this exchange, and it just made me think about the selection of songs. I did like the Chinese song "Nothing in My Name" or "Nothing on My Name," whichever version is very kind of subtle but very rich as well. It speaks. Contributes to defiance of the protest. And then I was also kind of thinking about the selection of these other kind of Western songs from Western context, predominantly from American context. And I was wondering, like, what is it links to, sorry, I am jumping now from one topic to another. But it links to something what Marco Distinto said in the chat, and I will pose that question after mine. But I'm thinking about this power of popular culture, as you say, to act as obviously, as you said yourself, as an agent. But I was just thinking about the cohesive power of these kind of popular culture items. To draw in maybe support from other contexts. Is that why they were used? Do you think was that the intention behind the choice of these songs, to draw in broader global attention to the Hong Kong cause, to democratic struggle?
I think it's just the fact that if a song can embody something, maybe then it's let's say a song or artwork, or art in general is creativity. And I think the Chinese people are robbed of our sense of creativity in how we've been structured and so systematically this is going back a long time. But more recently, the Cultural Revolution, when nationalists ran away to Taiwan with art and culture, with books that they can carry or artwork they could, and try to maintain some form of Chinese cultural history and form their own establishment. While in China, the communist rule, they were burning books. They just wanted to wipe that out, and then it's a tragedy for the people, because I know people who, I definitely know a lot of Western people who know Chinese history better than me, and I was raised in Hong Kong, and it's just, I think a lot of Chinese people in China don't know about Chinese history at all. There's just so much that's been washed away.
Thanks, Marilyn. So that's really, really insightful. I could talk. I have so many questions in my mind, and that we are outside of your presentation. Sorry, we're distracting you. But there's let's go back slightly. So a question from Marco. Thank you so much for the super interesting presentation, Marilyn. I am really interested in this idea of constructing less obvious data. And I was wondering if you have been thinking about how technological data, that is a blog post or a tweet, can show their agency by spreading through contagion, gaining some sort of autonomy, where the digital artifacts behave as activist matter in and of themselves, reaching new communities or reinforcing the existing ones. Did you find something similar in your research?
No, because I didn't, because I look at the content so much. I don't harvest a large set of data. I think it's because of the lack of technical skills in dealing with like the lack of technological background with harvesting data in that way. But I have a colleague who does that kind of data. From his dissertation was using Reddit. His name is Alex Groth. Maybe I can write you his name. And then, yeah, so interesting work. He uses CCO, communication as constitutive of organizing, this type of theorizing. And he looked at how a shitstorm happened when the gaming community experienced some discord. So for me, not, but it definitely is a lot happening in the digital, I would say.
Thanks. A lovely question from Maria Daskalaki. Thanks so much, Marilyn. Great talk. I would like to stand on art as a feminist critical spatial practice, and specifically how artistic artifacts become recontextualized or resemiotized in digital spaces or platforms. I think it is important to understand the doing of these artifacts, their performative qualities, inspiring feminist resistances and solidarities, for example. So I would like to hear a bit more about these qualities in the context of your study. Any reflections on this? Thank you.
I think I'm more thinking about what I'm doing too, as well. I focus on what they're doing, and I also wonder if there's like something to be done in engaging with the artist. Not for this work, I did not reach out to Denise Ho, but for my protest art paper, I use one work of protest art, and I got the artist's permission to use it because he is also a pseudonymous, he uses a pseudonym on Instagram to publish this work. His name is Hardcore Romanticist. And so I contacted him on Instagram to see if he would allow me to use his art to keep on doing my research. And that was good, that's okay. But yeah, I feel like I'm still a bit, I'm not doing that much when I'm just at the screen. And I know that I need to do more in interacting with the people who say on International Women's Day are out on the streets. You know, there's also data in what people are really doing now. But I don't think then that form of data is so much for I don't know, it's also a different kind of output then in the research that we do, right? Maybe that is more inspiring to what can happen for the community instead of saying a piece of paper that is, or a manuscript for a journal that reaches very few people. And so in that, maybe it is art as output even, and more organizing activities that that people can engage with one another to do, and exactly the performing. And I think this is a big problem if we only are all on the digital, because we have to, in the Hong Kong context, it's nice because that's where we can hide. But so here in Innsbruck, for example, it's wonderful that people can be out on the streets and really embody their joys and pains and be seen in that way.
Marilyn, thank you very much. I think that our audience have flagged so many different ways in which you could develop this work further, and it was a pleasure to hear a little bit about, like a snippet of well, what it was like to be in Hong Kong in 2019, but especially what it was like to be a feminist democratic artist within that space. So thank you so much. Our next session, the conference continues in 15 minutes. We're going to take a small break, and our next wonderful speaker is Kate Kenny. She's going to talk about her fearless speech, gender and speaking out, and the importance of disclosure. So please join us in, take time to replenish, take some tea, and then please do come back. Marilyn, thank you again.
Thank you, everyone. See you at Kate's session.
Bye.